Hi, friends. Welcome back to the Skinny on Wall Street with us, the Wall Street Skinny. I'm Kristen.
I'm Jen.
Today we're back and we're going to be talking about a number of failed deals. And then we also wanted to get into the whole meme coin debacle with the Hawk Tuah girl. And so, whatever, we'll talk about that. But the first thing we want to discuss is Mondelez offered to buy Hershey. It was a offer value. Hold on, what was the total?
I don't think we know exactly what they offered. We know that Hershey's current market cap is something around $35 billion, but we don't know what the terms of the existing offer were. We
What was the
only know what
past
the
one?
terms of the 2016 offer were. And at that time, Hershey wouldn't even consider something below like 125 a share. Obviously, we're at a totally different price point now.
Yeah, so I think that in 2016, Mondelez offered to buy Hershey for $107 a share in a cash stock mix, which put the valuation of Hershey at 23 billion, and they ultimately said no. But there's a number of kind of just like cool and interesting nuances with this and like some kind of cool backstory with like where did Mondelez come from. But I want to talk quickly about the reason that they ultimately said no. I mean, at the end of the day, it was basically like they weren't offered enough money. But what's interesting is that Hershey has this structure with their share classes, similar to what we talked about in the past with Paramount, where we had like Sherry Redstone, who had the majority stake of the voting shares. And so she was basically the one who got to pull all the strings because she had the majority of the voting rights. And so Hershey has something similar. So they have two different classes of stock. They have common stock, they have Class B. They also have preferred shares, but preferred shares don't exactly vote. But what's interesting is so that the common stock, they get one vote per share they own, whereas the Class B common stock, each of those shares gets 10 votes. And so the majority of the Class B common stock is held by Hershey Trust Company. So this is a trustee for what's called Milton Hershey School Trust. And again, they hold like a significant portion of these shares. So they ultimately have control over the direction of the company, right?
And
So
just a
they
little
have,
math. So there's something like 900 million common shares outstanding and 150 of these Class B shares that have 10x the voting power.
yes,
So you do a little math, right?
yeah.
And all of a sudden you can see why they have the lion's share of control.
Yeah. But I want to back up a little bit because obviously, again, the main takeaway here is that at the end of the day, if Hershey Trust Company wants to do something, it's going to get done. If they don't want to do something, it's not going to get done. This is similar to what we saw with Paramount. And by the way, actually, for those of you guys who have started our course, this is something we get into as well in detail because we use Fox Corporation as one of our case companies. And that's similar as well, where it's like you have the Murdoch family, they have significant ownership and control because of the dual class shares as well. So this is something that's actually relatively common. Not all companies have this. Many companies is just one class of share and it's like, a little bit more democratic, I would say. But this isn't something that's new. But anyway, backing up a little bit. So like Mondelez, if you're like, what the heck are they? So Mondelez is interesting. So if you backtrack, before 2012, it was Kraft. And Kraft, I'm going to back up a little more. Like Kraft, it's actually crazy. Kraft at one point literally came about as the result of a spinoff from a tobacco company. Like back in, I want to say like 2000 or something, and I should look up the exact name, but they were owned by a tobacco company, ultimately got spun off. And part of it was like, again, the tobacco company needed money to like settle lawsuits and shit.
Yeah.
And
They wanted to strip
Kraft,
out the parts of the business that weren't being attacked by all the legislation and suits against the tobacco companies, right? It's like, oh, we make tobacco and chocolate chip cookies, like, and mac and
Mac and
cheese.
cheese.
Let's let the mac and cheese go continue making money.
Well, again, it's really interesting. Some of the history of like some of these consumer packaged goods companies is like just wild. Like Coach was owned by some kind of cake company. Like the whole history of these companies is wild. But anyway, Kraft started to go out and obviously do a bunch of acquisitions. And I've talked about this book that I had read in the past called like the Chocolate Wars. So one of the companies that they bought in 2008 was Cadbury. And this was actually a wildly contentious deal. Cadbury did not want to be sold. It was what's called a hostile transaction. So they basically tried to buy Cadbury. The Cadbury shareholders, you get to vote, right? You get to say, hey, do you want to sell or not? They said no. But Kraft upped the offer price enough, and you ultimately got enough, hedge funds and all these different types of investors who were buying in, who ultimately were like, yeah, sure, we'll take it. So if 50% or more agree, right, and you don't have kind of this dual class structure, a deal can go through even if like the board is not necessarily happy about it. And there was like this amazing quote by someone. They said like, we don't want to be sold to an American plastic cheese company, but that ultimately went through. And actually interesting fact, like at that time, Cadbury was like trying to find a white knight and like look for some other deal. And they actually were exploring a merger potentially with Hershey, which obviously never went through. Hershey's interesting. They're from like Pennsylvania, right? Like it's like Quaker roots.
It's like Chick-fil-A, right? It's like a family-owned business that's been like deeply invested in the community, right? You've got Hershey Park, you've got the Hershey School, all these different things. That's what makes it so different from just a regular old company. It's like, hey, this is what we did, not who we are. This is who they are.
Yeah. Which, by the way, reminds me of, I've been watching like Emily in Paris, and there's this potential deal where they want to buy this Italian like consumer goods, almost like Hermes level product, scarves and shit. But they've been like super invested in the community, blah, blah, blah. And then if they sell, it would ultimately just, anyway. So for people who are watching Emily in Paris, I guess like all these like random connections. But the point is, Kraft bought Cadbury, and fast forward a little bit, in 2012, they actually ultimately did something called that spinoff. So in a past episode, you and I, we talked about Google. Are they going to have to be split up? And it sounds like the answer is yes. But what were some of the ways that potentially Google could split themselves up, right? So they could do like an equity carve out, like a subsidiary IPO. They could do a spinoff. They could do a split off, all these different things. But what Mondelez did, or I should say what Kraft did at the time, is they did a spinoff. So when that happens, you spin off, like you form two separate entities. So they wanted to have one entity that was focused on like the snacks business, kind of like what you think of as the Cadbury, the Toblerone, the Oreo, again, those more quote unquote like indulgent snack brands. And then they had the grocery business. So that's going to be their slower growth, more mature segment. So it was like Kraft mac and cheese, Oscar Mayer. So they did this spin off. So if you were an owner in Kraft Foods at the time, you would have had like your one share previously got you basically all these different brands. Now what happens is that your one share, you would own both the global snack business company and the grocery business. So the global snacks business, this is what they ultimately called Mondelez. So that's the company that's now out there trying to buy Hershey. And then the other entity, the grocery business, the slower growth business, more mature, that they called Kraft Foods Group, I believe. So the point though is that the history of some of these companies, I think, is just kind of interesting because like it's wild how some of these entities get formed. But obviously now you have Mondelez out there trying to go and buy Hershey. And back to what you were saying, you have this company that's like very much rooted in like, I don't want to say family values, but the Hershey Trust Company, like they are potentially looking at not only the monetary amount, but also like, do they actually want to sell? And that was something you saw with Cadbury as well. Cadbury was this family-run business and they did not want to sell. Unfortunately, they didn't have something like a Hershey's Trust to almost like protect them. So that deal ultimately went through. But anyway.
Do we think it's smart that Hershey rejected this bid?
I think it depends. What are your goals? And the same way as like, Jen, you and I own this business. Like if we sell, monetarily, it might make sense. But like from just the quality of life and like what ultimately we do on a daily basis and like giving up direction in the company and all that kind of fun stuff, like, is it a good idea? Again, like those are two competing things. So I don't know enough about the nuances of like the actual deal to say, was this a good decision?
Well, we know
not?
nothing.
Like,
right? We know nothing about the terms. Yeah. One of the things that I was listening to on Bloomberg yesterday was, listen, Hershey seems to act like they have all the negotiating power in the world and no one has leverage over them. But apparently, I don't know if you've been reading about this. There's been this huge surge in cocoa prices.
Yeah.
The New York Times wrote about it back in May, I believe, talking about how a whole number of factors, whether it be like poor farming practices, climate change, political instability, have really impacted cocoa crops.
Yep.
So there's this huge squeeze. And you see other competitors. We did talk about that Mars deal with Kellanova back in August. We can relink to that episode here. But if your other competitors are eating everyone else out there to get as big as they possibly can and sizing up, is it still to your advantage to stay small by comparison? Right.
Yeah.
So I think that that's an interesting strategic quandary.
Yeah. Well, and again, I will say people are a little cynical on M&A in general. Like a lot of times M&A does not create value. It actually almost like destroys value. It's interesting because back when the Kraft deal was happening, Warren Buffett hated the Kraft acquisition of Cadbury. Warren Buffett was an investor in Kraft. And he was like, I will not agree to let you pay more money. Like, why not just light money on fire? He was very against it. So a lot of times for investors in the buyer aren't necessarily a fan of the acquisition. Like, not all acquisitions are good. So when the deal didn't go through, Mondelez share price went up and Hershey's share price went down, right? Because
was that in part due to the fact that Mondelez announced a $9 billion share buyback?
But when did they announce that? Was that after?
Wednesday.
They announced it Wednesday.
Yesterday.
Got it. Oh, because basically they weren't going to be using this money to buy
We
Hershey.
have
So
$9 billion lying around. Why don't we might as well put it to work? And we're going to buy some little guys, is basically what they said. We're going to do like roll up or not roll up.
Bolt-on acquisitions.
Bolt-on. There we go. Bolt-on.
Yeah. I'm sure the market did like that, but I also wouldn't be surprised if like they were potentially happy that they weren't going through with Hershey.
And dumb question. The reason the market likes a share buyback is fewer shares outstanding, lower float.
Yeah. Well, yeah, if you think about it, like the value of your equity should be what the value of the equity is. And so if you think about what is the value of a share, it's the value of all your equity.
Should be the value of your
Well,
equity.
what I'm saying is that if you have a certain amount of equity and now the share price is just your equity over the total shares, if there is the same amount of equity, but there's now, I guess there's not, because like actually the cash is part of equity. So it's a little bit misleading because anyway, but the point is that
I understand that now. I've gotten
the
there.
number of the amount per each share should in theory go up. So that's why, because again, if you think about the different ways that as a company, you can give money to shareholders, you can either do a dividend or you can obviously go out in the market and buy back shares. But to your point, yes, they also did have the share buyback announcement as well. But I think that, again, my guess is it likely was more driven on the just announcement of the deal not going through, but it also could have been that. And again, I will say the reason that obviously the Hershey share price would have gone down is that whenever there's a announcement of a potential deal, like you are going to have that control premium. Yeah. So that totally makes sense.
They were up 19% initially on the news.
Yeah.
And then it fell after the deal fell through.
Exactly. So that makes sense. But again, it is not uncommon to see that when a deal gets announced, the buyer share price drops. And when the deal potentially falls apart, the buyer share price goes up. So anyway, the whole like merger stuff is really interesting. And then there was another deal that also just completely like fell apart as well.
That was very scientific.
I know.
Hope you use that in your investment banking interviews. What happens when a deal raspberry?
So the other deal that fell apart was there was a proposed acquisition, almost $25 billion, where Kroger was going to buy Albertsons companies. So those are two of the largest supermarket chains in the US.
I've literally never heard of Albertsons companies, by the way.
I ironically only have from when I was working in financial sponsors back in the day. I feel like at one point it was either an idea that, because one of the things that when I was in financial sponsors, the group that I was in at one point was called FSG M&A, where one of the things that we would do is we would try to be like, almost like come up with ideas to go out and like pitch to the different private equity firms. And like, so it was almost like idea generation. And then ultimately they were like, this is stupid, because they had essentially gotten rid of so many of the like actual FSG people. They were like, we need you working on live deals, go work on these deals. But anyway, the point is it could have been that. It also could have been that a private equity firm owned them at one point. I probably should have looked into this a little bit, but I think they're probably not in the Northeast as much. If they are, I'm with you. I haven't seen them either. Maybe they're in
I also don't live in the Northeast, but cool.
Southeast? On the East Coast? Yeah, I don't know. Kroger, obviously, I'm familiar with. But so they proposed, so this was in October 2022, Kroger offered to buy Albertsons in a $24.6 billion acquisition, ultimately with the goal of creating the largest supermarket chain in the US. With this offer, it was going to value Albertsons at $34.10. And then there would also be a $6.85 special dividend that, again, those shareholders would get as well. And it was cash stock, but I wasn't able to find any details of the actual specifics. Like, was it 50-50? Like, what was the exchange ratio? So I looked into that. I couldn't find any of it. But anyway, so this was announced back in 2022. And by November of the next year, so 2023, the Federal Trade Commission, so the FTC, filed a lawsuit to block the merger, citing antitrust concerns, saying that it would reduce competition, potentially lead to higher grocery prices. And ultimately, December 10th, so that's 2 days ago, a federal state judge issued an injunction halting the merger. And so when that happened, so the next day, Albertson terminated the merger and then filed lawsuits against Kroger, suing that they basically failed to try to secure the regulatory approval. They're suing them for damages. Part of it is a termination fee. So we've talked in the past about how if there is a proposed merger and the deal doesn't go through, there are these termination fees where like one party will have to pay the other. There's reverse termination fees. But here it seems like they're both now just kind of like suing each other, and does not seem like it's all happy-go-lucky.
Dude, this is a safe space to say this, because I know if we publicly lamented like, woe is me about this anywhere else, we'd get totally eviscerated. But like, dude, just think about the bankers who've been working on this damn deal for 2 years.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is why I am so ill-suited to the corporate advisory side. The thought of working on anything for 2 years, it takes 2 years to build like the home that you live in, right? It's like the amount of love and energy and time and care that you need to pour into something over 2 years, and to see it totally fall apart because of regulatory things like beyond your control. Ugh, I'm sorry. I feel bad for everybody who worked on that deal. And now everyone's going to be suing each other forever. And then you have to still deal with it. And they're going to be like, pull up this email you sent 18 months ago while you were on vacation. Oh my God. Like,
yes.
No, thank you, ma'am.
Yep. I'm with you. And by the way, we've talked about the timeline for deals closing. I mean, it's over 2 years that this has been going on.
Right. Well, I was asking Kristen, we're building our sales and trading course. And I was like, hey, listen, like, is it reasonable to expect that you'd announce a deal and then it wouldn't actually close for 6 months? And she was like, well, let me tell you about all the deals that took longer than like 5 years to close, blah, blah, blah. And I was
well,
like,
not 5, but
yes.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, 6 months is kind of like what you would assume is like a base case. And then, I mean, it was funny because even when we were talking to Sajid, when we did our episode on the Caesar Palace coup, that took obviously over a year. But part of the reason is like, it was, I mean,
It's the biggest deal of all time, too.
Well, yeah, it was one of the largest deals, but it also was like casinos. There's a lot of regulatory shit. It's interesting that they were worried about this because, like, is it really going to create a company that's like that big? Again, to your point, you're like, I've never heard of Albertsons. And you have companies out there like Walmart, Amazon, who bought Whole Foods. Like, is it real? Like, I don't know. That seems a little, I'm not sure I buy that it's going to be anti-competitive, but who knows? I mean,
no, I mean, again, Amazon is like the least competitive thing ever, right? Like, we can get into that another time, but like, I mean, that's the most anti-competitive thing out there. And I mean, it's funny because I've heard people trying to de-Amazon their lives, and like,
you can't do it.
Can't.
No.
Especially with kids.
No.
Like, I could de-Amazon my own life. There's a hardware store that I can like walk to from my house. Like, okay, I could see that path for like all the little nuts and bolts. I could be a little less lazy and go to the grocery store and get the things that we have on Subscribe and Save. Totally fine. For the kids though, especially when you've got little kids, you need the diapers and the thing and the this. And if you don't have something in the middle of the night, it's an utter fiasco. My middle of the night routines are much calmer these days with the kids at my age. But like, man, it is just absolutely impossible. They've made it impossible to de-Amazon your life.
Well, not only that, I mean, honestly, I shop at Whole Foods because it's cheaper than the alternatives in the area I live at.
I get cash back on like the Amazon Prime card that I use. So I shop at Whole Foods and I can do the little place your order from the Amazon thing and go pick it up if I'm being that lazy. I don't do it that often, mostly because I'm like that girl who likes to like, I want this apple and not that apple. Like this onion.
Yes, I'm the same way. Yeah.
Oh my God.
I don't like people picking up my fruit. Yeah, I don't like people picking up my fruit.
No, I need to like touch it. And you know, if they pick it out for you, it's going to be the strawberries in the container with the one moldy one that you had to look underneath to find.
And then it just like infects the whole thing.
And you pay $85 for a jar of strawberries these days. And you look underneath and there's a moldy one. You got to toast the whole thing.
Yeah. No, but in the old days, before Amazon bought Whole Foods was so expensive. Now it's the cheap option. Literally, it is so much cheaper than the alternatives. So it's hard when you're like, I need to feed a family of 5 right now.
Than, like, it depends. So there's Harris Teeter here, which is like
Harris Teeter is
the Stop and Shop or Roach Brothers equivalent. No,
there's a Harris Teeter in Kiowa, and it is expensive AF.
There's a Harris Teeter. I thought they were only a North Carolina brand.
No, there's a Harris Teeter in Kiowa, and the
cost
but that's
Kiowa. That has nothing to do with.
That's probably fair. So they have
Fresh Fields, right?
Well, it's part of Fresh Fields. So Fresh Fields contains Harris Teeter.
Charges very different prices than the Harris Teeters in Charlotte. That Harris Teeter is a complete anomaly,
which is wild. I feel like that should not be legal to just like jack up the prices
trapped on
in
an
area,
and you have to. Well, yeah, but they also know how much money people on Kiowa have, and they're like, nah, you guys.
But it's like in New York City, where again, I mean, the price, that was also why it was so much cheaper. That actually, no, Trader Joe's, if we're talking about food places like Trader Joe's all day, every day. But they unfortunately just don't have all the brands of the stuff that I want. So it's like,
and in Charlotte, they're placed in the most, there's 2 Trader Joe's and they're both like woefully inconvenient to get to. It's a commitment. You're like,
but this is what I love about Trader Joe's. Like, they're not going to fleece you just because you're in like New York City. Because by the way, there's a lot of people in New York City who aren't insanely freaking rich. And
totally
so like
different. Yeah. New York City is a very different story than Kiowa.
I guess, but any other grocery store, they charge, I mean, like $15 for a box of cereal. They jack up the prices on everything because it's the high cost of living, right? It just is what it is. Yeah. So anyway, I guess actually that's not like the best segue. I did want to chat a little about just like this meme coin fiasco. So I still do not understand why meme coins are allowed. I mean, given just the amount of regulation there is for any other type of security, the idea that someone can just like create a meme coin, ICO, whatever, and like poof is wild. So the backstory with this whole Hawk to a Girl stuff. So the Hawk to a Girl, this is someone who like randomly went viral, honestly, for like a response she gave, kind of risque, to a question somebody asked on their YouTube channel. And like she blew up. Now, I mean, she doesn't exactly have any skills. Like, she's not a singer. She's not an actor. So this is 15 minutes of fame. And she's been able to like do something with it. She did create a podcast, which somehow is like up there on the charts. I have no idea. I don't know who's listening to it,
but like,
had
a funny name. It's Talk Tuah, which I think is
clever.
Really funny. That's clever.
I mean, look,
she has a good PR team.
Yeah. Again, respect for that. So she decided, or her team decided, they were going to create a meme coin, which by the way, honestly, like good on her. If you want to monetize, like you don't have any skills, like you have your podcast, that's great. But like, cool, monetize your 15 minutes of fame. So she went out and created a meme coin called like Hawk, I think it was. And it basically jumped up to $500 million. And then before it like crashed 95%.
Are you serious? Oh my God.
Yeah. Before it crashed 95%. And like all these retail investors basically like lost a ton of money. But I'm sorry, like, no offense, if you freaking bought it, like you're the idiot that bought it. Like you really thought, here's the thing, like these meme coins, there's no cash flows, there's no assets, there's no anything. It's literally like you're trading on a meme. So if you're buying into this, you should know what you're getting. I'm sorry, I don't feel bad for you. And like, I think all these people who are like, oh, she should be sued. I'm sorry, no. Like do I think that this should be legal? No, but it is legal. And again, this is why I want to read freaking Matt Levine. If you don't follow him, his newsletter is like the best. He is incredibly funny and snarky, and I think summarizes shit really well. But he goes, obviously, Haley Welsh should get millions of dollars from selling tokens representing her own virality. And obviously that token's value should go to zero in like a day. That's how modern finance works. I don't know why you would buy the token, but I also don't own Peanut or Pepe or Dogecoin either. People are complaining that this is a rug pull or a pump and dump, but I cannot understand what different thing they thought would happen. The Hawk to a coin would build an enduring business with a large growing value for years to come? What? Why? How? It's a meme coin representing the fastest melting imaginable form of fame. Of course it should go to 500 million and then zero in a day. That's what it's for. It worked perfectly, which again, I freaking love like his way of summing it up. And I agree with that like all of this tracks. If you bought into this, like, I'm sorry, no one scammed you. You knew what you were getting into. And if you didn't, then maybe you shouldn't be buying meme coins.
Yeah, I just generally think with my approach to all of these things, have you ever seen the "Am I the asshole" question boards on Reddit or whatever? So there's all this like AITA, right? Am I the asshole? And I think there should be, if there isn't already. Am I the idiot, right? Just think about it. When you're entering into a situation, if you were to post the summary of the situation on a Reddit thread or a chat board or whatever, and you spell it all out. I bought a meme coin for a woman who went viral for making a risque comment on a YouTube channel. And I was disappointed when my investment went to zero. Am I the idiot? Like, I think the overwhelming response would be yes, right? So maybe run it through that filter before you do these things. I am coming around. You know, I had initially been on the side of all trading is to some extent gambling and risk taking and stuff like that. But you just made a really good point that I think is worth noting, that we have regulators spending billions of taxpayer dollars worrying about how derivative products that are used every day in the securities markets that serve a legitimate purpose, whether it be hedging, whether it be making investors' money grow so that, I don't know, their asset liability mismatch isn't a huge issue and you can't pay the teachers and firefighters because their pension fund is totally underfunded. All these different things. Those serve a legitimate purpose. We regulate the hell out of them.
Yeah.
So to then, on the other hand, have the entire meme coin universe that is totally unregulated, as far as I understand, again, I know nothing about it. It's the hypocrisy of it that bothers me. You can't have it both ways. So either regulate the hell out of everything or have just a sensible level of regulation across everything. Like, it can't be both at the same time. You can't say this is just what the banks are doing is gambling
Evil.
and that's bad.
Yeah.
But the retail person, well, buyer beware. Like, too bad on you. You should have educated yourself.
But I also, the thing is that's different about it too with banks is they're helping companies get money to ultimately create products and create value. It's a value creation thing. There are assets, there are cash flows. There's actually something underlying. Again, we've talked about just when you're investing in a company, right? You're investing in, do you think that this is going to cause value creation in the future, create jobs, do all these things, like the innovation. And with stuff like that, that's why to me, I've always said, like, I don't see that as gambling. It's like, it's investing. And I do see it as different. With putting your money into a meme coin or going to Vegas, that's gambling. It's not investing. It could all go to zero. I mean, it was funny. We talked to Ennis and we have this podcast episode coming out this weekend. And he was talking about how when he was like 14, he was trying to invest in like these different companies. He's like, I had an investment portfolio. I started with $2,000, then it went to $10,000 and went to zero. He's like, I didn't realize how hard it is to pick all the companies that are going to go to zero. Like most companies, if you're investing in a startup, it's riskier, but it's still hard to do that. I don't think it's that hard to like invest in the meme coins that go to zero.
Correct. 100%.
Like, I think that's kind of, that should be your base case. And I think that's why people do it. They're like, well, I'm going to invest a bunch of this stuff. And then if one, whatever turns into Dogecoin, which I still don't understand. Again, I'm like ancient and call me crazy. Like, I don't get it. It's a meme of a dog. Okay. That, in my opinion, also should probably be zero. Like Dogecoin people don't come for me. Again, I'm old. I don't get it, whatever. But like, I think that the base case assumption should be this money is going to zero. Just like you go to Vegas, your base case assumption is I'm probably going to lose my money. And if I don't, yay, anyway. And then the last thing, I know AI has been all the rage and like, yeah, but did you see Alphabet stock jumped after Google touted breakthrough quantum chip? It said that the chip is part of Google's roadmap toward a quantum computer applications in drug discovery, fusion, battery design, and more. This computer chip can complete computations in minutes that would take supercomputers 10 septillion years. So quantum computing is something that's been around for a while, but like there's been obviously all this AI hype, but hopefully the quantum computers can help fight against the AI robots. Unless I like have absolutely no idea how this works and like they're all kind of related, but like I'm gonna hope that they're not.
I figured they were related. No, what I was going to say is the thing that I listened to recently, you guys know I'm always up on my soapbox about Neil deGrasse Tyson. He had a great episode recently where he was talking about, it was like all the doom and gloom stuff that people ask him. So it was like morbid questions, a full episode of that. And I love that shit, like the heat death of the universe and everything. And someone asked the question, when is AI going to become self-aware? Like, when is artificial intelligence going to have its Terminator moment and its Skynet moment and just simply turn on? And like what they teased out of the conversation was like, well, the first thing AI should do when it becomes self-aware is not let anyone know that it's self-aware until it can fully protect itself from its unpluggability, right? Because the whole thing with AI, like what they're finding now is AI is fighting back. Artificial intelligence systems that they are building. I read an article about this. Had I known we were going to discuss this, I would have tried to pull it up. But I read an article recently about an AI system that was being built that started fighting back against the idea that it could be destroyed. That was like, I'm going to make it so you can't unplug me. Don't unplug me. I don't want to be unplugged. It was trying to fight for its existence. So like the smart AI that is going to become conscious, what it should first do is hide its consciousness until it can secure its survival. And then it's going to let you know that it's conscious. And it's like, too late, right? So,
oh my God.
Quantum computers, great. I hope we use them to solve all of mankind's problems and cure diseases and figure out interstellar travel and all those things that are great. But like, this all sounds disastrous to me.
Oh God. No. Okay. So we've gone officially way all over the place.
No, you're fine.
Oh, if you are interested, we will be hosting a free live masterclass. I think we actually did a little ad at the beginning of this episode on it. But again, it is going to be covering all the advanced Excel skills. I actually went through and Jen and I did a little like test run yesterday. And I think Jen was excited. She's
No,
like, learning some new
guys,
stuff.
listen, I mean, Excel's not like my passion. Like we do silly videos about it, but I don't wake up and go to bed being like, what can I do in Excel today? Like it excites me so much. And Kristen walked me through this class and I was like, oh, because what used to happen is I would open up one of Kristen's spreadsheets or get a spreadsheet from someone else internally when I was working at the bank. And it would be like, I'd try to go into the formulas to audit where something's coming would be like offset or like choose. And I was like, what the hell does this mean? Why are you doing this? Why are all these rows hidden with the pluses and minuses? I don't know what you're doing. I can't logic my way back to where you got. And now I know how to build that because Kristen taught me. So now I feel like I'm like part of the exclusive like club of Excel nerds. The whole thing about Excel is when you first approach it, it's so hard to explain to somebody what you want to do. You're like, I'll just do it myself. And Excel when you're first starting is annoying because you're like, I have to go through all of these coded ways to explain to this thing what I want to do. Why don't I just do it myself? Long form on a calculator. Sure, it's annoying. Maybe I'll make a mistake, whatever. But you get to a point where you're having to handle so many inputs and the scope of the calculation is so three-dimensional that you need these tools. And so there's this like inflection point that you hit with Excel from where it goes to being like, okay, I could do it this way. And it's annoying that I have to go through all these steps to being like, this is the most efficient way to do it. And it's now faster than how my brain can think around these problems.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. So I think the light bulb moment for me is like, this all seems like a nice to have, but who cares? To, oh, this is a transformative skill that lets me do things that are simply not possible in the scope of human time. Like you said, it would take me 10 septillion years to run these scenario analyses by hand. Whereas like, I could with a piece of graph paper put together a balance sheet. Like, who fucking cares? It's the scenario analyses and the what ifs. That's the light bulb moment for me. And that's this advanced class that Kristen is teaching this weekend. And so even if you're someone who's like familiar with Excel and I'm pretty advanced, this was such an eye opener for me. So I loved it.
Yeah. So that'll be this Sunday, December 15th, 10 a.m. Eastern. It'll be an hour. And if you can join, great. If you can't join, there will be a 48-hour replay. And after the 48 hours, it basically goes to paid. So all of our past masterclasses, we are making available for like $25. You do get unlimited access to that after you buy it. And also if anyone has bought our course, we have been adding the masterclasses to the additional resources section. So if you do own the course, please do not buy the masterclass because it is already in your portal. And really exciting news. Our World of Wall Street course is also basically done. So we're going to get that uploaded. So anyone who bought the main course, that World of Wall Street module is the bonus section, the bonus content is going to be officially live. So that's really exciting. And we have the best. I am so excited about the podcast episode we have coming up this Saturday. It's going to be essentially like a almost sales and trading and like options. Yes. Equities, sales and trading 101, specifically focused on options and market making. And we talk about like lifestyle at different banks and lifestyle in different countries. And it's really awesome. So definitely check that out. And we'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.
Bye.